The argument didn't start as a scream. It never did. It started the way all of ours started, quiet tension sitting in the room like fog, thick enough to choke on. My mother was standing by the kitchen counter, arms crossed, eyes already sharp. I could tell from the way she exhaled that whatever I said next wouldn't matter. It never did. My father sat in his usual spot, pretending to be busy with something on his phone, his silence a habit he'd perfected over years. She began listing things I hadn't done right, things I should be doing better, things I somehow owed her. Every sentence carried the same message: I was a disappointment, a burden, someone who existed on borrowed space. I listened, nodding occasionally, not because I agreed, but because defending myself only made it worse. I'd learned that lesson young. I reminded her, calmly, that I worked long hours, that I helped when I could, that I wasn't trying to disrespect anyone. My voice stayed steady, but my chest felt tight, like something inside me was being slowly crushed. I wasn't asking for praise. I just wanted fairness, maybe understanding, maybe for once, to not be treated like a problem that needed fixing. That's when her voice changed. It grew louder, sharper, filled with something ugly. She stepped closer, pointing at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into her home by mistake. The words came fast, overlapping, fueled by years of resentment I didn't even know she carried. She said I was ungrateful, that I thought I was better than them, that if I didn't like how things were, I knew where the door was. Then she yelled it. Get out and never come back. The room went completely still. For a moment I wondered if I'd imagined it, but the look on her face told me I hadn't. There was no shock in her eyes, no instant regret. Just certainty, like she'd finally said something she'd rehearsed in her head 100 times. I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something. Anything, to tell her she'd gone too far, to tell me to stay. He didn't. He couldn't even look at me. That silence hurt more than her words. Something inside me went quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't ask if she really meant it. I knew the answer. I walked to my room slowly, my hands trembling just enough to notice. I grabbed my jacket, my phone, my wallet. That was it. Years of my life reduced to what fit in my hands. When I walked back through the living room, she was still standing there. She didn't stop me. She didn't soften. She didn't say my name. I paused at the door, hoping, stupidly, that someone would say something that would make me turn around. No one did. So I left. The night air felt colder than it should have, but also strangely clear. As the door closed behind me, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't separate: hurt, relief, disbelief, and something else that scared me, most of all: freedom. They thought they had pushed me out with nothing. What they didn't know was that I'd been holding the house together in ways they never bothered to see. I walked away without a word. And for the first time, I didn't look back. The first few days after I left felt unreal, like I was living someone else's life. I woke up expecting to hear my mother's voice echoing down the hallway, already criticizing something before the day even started. Instead, there was silence. Real silence. The kind that didn't demand anything from me. It was uncomfortable at first, like my body didn't know how to exist without tension wrapped around it. I stayed on a friend's couch that first week. They didn't ask many questions, and I was grateful for that. At night, staring at the ceiling, my mind replayed everything over and over. Her words, my father's silence, the way the door sounded when it closed behind me. I kept wondering if my phone would light up with a message telling me to come home, that things had gone too far, that someone was sorry. It never did. Days turned into weeks. I found a small place of my own. It wasn't much: thin walls, second-hand furniture, and a window that barely let in light, but it was mine. No one told me how to breathe there. No one counted my mistakes. I could come and go without explaining myself. Slowly, the tightness in my chest began to loosen. Back at the house, I knew exactly what they were thinking. They assumed this was temporary. They always did. I had left before, after arguments, after harsh words, but I had always come back. Apologized. Fixed things. Paid the price for peace. They believed time would do the work for them again. What they didn't notice was what stopped happening. The bills that were always paid on time stopped being paid. The quiet support they'd grown used to vanished without announcement. I didn't call to remind them. I didn't warn them. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was done explaining things that were never acknowledged anyway. At first, they blamed the system, the bank. A mistake. Something external that could be ignored for a little longer. But reminders don't stay quiet forever. Envelopes piled up. The tension returned to that house, this time heavier, more urgent. Only now I wasn't there to absorb it. Meanwhile, my life kept moving forward. I started sleeping better, eating when I was hungry instead of when it was convenient for everyone else. I noticed small things, the sound of rain against the window, the relief of not being criticized for how I lived, the strange peace of knowing no one could suddenly demand more from me. For the first time, I realized how exhausted I'd been for years without ever admitting it. Sometimes guilt crept in. Late at night, it whispered that I was being selfish, that family meant sacrifice, that I should reach out first, but then I remembered the exact tone of her voice when she told me to leave. I remembered how easy it was for them to let me go. And the guilt faded. The silence between us grew thicker, heavier. It wasn't empty anymore, it was full of things unsaid, truths avoided, consequences waiting to be noticed. They still didn't call to ask how I was, they only waited, confident that I'd break first. I didn't. I let the silence speak for me, and somewhere in that quiet, I finally began to understand something important. The absence they felt wasn't my punishment. It was simply the result of taking me for granted. They just hadn't realized it yet. The call came late in the evening, the kind of hour people choose when they're already stressed and don't want to admit it. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, listening to the city outside, when my phone lit up with my father's name. For a long moment I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it ring until the silence made its own point, but another part of me was curious, not hopeful, just curious. I answered. His voice sounded different, tighter, older. There was no greeting, no concern about where I was or how I'd been surviving. He went straight to the question, as if saying anything else would make the truth harder to face. Why did you stop paying the mortgage? I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully predictable. Weeks of silence, and this was what finally broke it. Not me leaving, not the words that pushed me out. Money, I didn't stop, I said calmly. I just left. There was a pause, the kind where someone realizes they might be standing on ground that's about to give way. That doesn't make sense, he replied. The payment didn't go through. I know. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear my mother moving in the background, her voice low and anxious, asking what was wrong. For once I didn't feel the need to step in and fix things. You were handling that? He asked slowly. Most of it, I said. For a long time. The silence on the other end grew heavy. It wasn't disbelief anymore. It was shock. A truth rearranging itself in his mind, forcing him to see past years of assumptions. The house hadn't stayed afloat by magic. Stability hadn't just happened. It had been carried quietly, by someone they never thought to thank. My mother took the phone then. Her voice was careful, softer than I remembered. You can't just walk away like this, she said. We're family. I took a breath, steady and controlled. I didn't walk away. That was said in anger. She replied quickly, as if the words could be erased by calling them temporary. You know how things get. Yes, I said. I do. She started explaining. Stress, misunderstandings, how hard things had been for them, how they never realized I was doing so much. Each sentence sounded less like an apology and more like panic trying to disguise itself as reason. I'm not calling to argue, I said. I just wanted to answer the question. There was nothing dramatic in my voice, no accusation, just truth spoken plainly, and somehow that seemed to hit harder than anger ever could. So what now? My father asked quietly. I looked around my small room. The imperfect furniture, the life I was building piece by piece. Now, I said, I keep paying for my own life. Neither of them spoke. For the first time, they understood what my absence really meant. Not just emotionally, but practically. The weight they'd placed on me without ever acknowledging it had finally dropped back into their own hands. When the call ended, I set my phone down and sat there for a while, letting the quiet settle. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. The truth had been said, and it hadn't required shouting or cruelty. Weeks ago, I'd left without a word. Tonight, a few simple sentences had said everything they needed to hear. After that call, everything changed, even though nothing was said out loud. The silence that followed wasn't the same silence as before. It was heavier, more aware. They knew now. They couldn't unknow it, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of that knowledge for them. A few days later, messages started coming in. Careful ones. Polite ones, words chosen like fragile glass. My mother asked if we could talk things through. My father suggested I come by just for a visit, like nothing permanent had ever been broken. None of the messages mentioned an apology. None of them mentioned the words that pushed me out. They spoke as if time alone should smooth everything over, as if consequences were negotiable. I didn't respond right away. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I was finally listening to myself. For so long, my instinct had been to fix, to soothe, to step in before discomfort turned into damage. Now I let the discomfort exist. I let it sit where it belonged. When I finally replied, my message was short. I said I wasn't ready to come back. I said I needed space. I said I was choosing peace. I didn't explain myself beyond that because I'd spent years explaining myself to people who never really listened. Their reaction came quickly. Fear leaked through the words. Urgency, a realization that I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't another phase I'd grow tired of. For the first time, they weren't in control of the situation, and it showed. I thought I would feel guilty, or angry, or triumphant. Instead, I felt calm. My life, slowly but steadily, was becoming my own. I settled into routines that belonged to me. Mornings without tension, evenings without dread. Decisions made without asking permission or bracing for judgment. I learned how much energy I had when it wasn't constantly being drained. Sometimes memories surfaced unexpectedly. A laugh from the past, a moment that had once felt warm. Those memories still hurt, but they no longer pulled me backward. I understood now that love without respect isn't love, it's obligation wearing a familiar face. Weeks later, my father called again. This time his voice was quiet, tired. He didn't ask about money. He didn't make demands. He just said, "We didn't realize how much you were holding together." I believed that he meant it. But meaning it now didn't erase what had already been done. "I hope things work out for you," I told him honestly. And I did hope that. I wasn't wishing them pain. I was simply refusing to take it on myself anymore. When the call ended, I sat by my window and watched the city lights flicker on, one by one. Each light felt like a small reminder that life keeps moving forward, even after doors are slammed shut. The revenge everyone expects is loud, cruel, destructive. Mine was quiet. It was building a life where I wasn't afraid. It was not returning to a place that broke me. It was letting my absence say what my voice never could. They told me to get out and never come back. So I didn't. And in walking away, I finally found something they never gave me: peace.